He is arguably the most influential figure in Christian history, second only to Jesus Christ. He wrote much of the New Testament and carried the gospel to the known world. But before he was Paul the Apostle, he was Saul of Tarsus, a man whose very name struck terror in the hearts of early Christians. Born in the bustling Roman city of Tarsus, Saul was a man of two worlds. He possessed coveted Roman citizenship by birth, yet he was a devout Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. To understand Saul, you have to understand the intense, rigorous world of first century Jewish education. Like other Jewish boys, his training began at the age of 5 in the Bet Sefer, or House of the Book. By the age of 10, he was expected to have memorized the entire Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. From ages 10 to 14, he entered the Bet Talmud, where he memorized the rest of the Hebrew scriptures, which is the entire Old Testament, and learned the complex art of asking questions and debating the law. But Saul did not stop there. Only the most elite, brilliant students advanced to the final stage, the Bet Midrash, or House of Study. Saul moved to Jerusalem to study at the feet of Gamaliel, one of the most famous and respected rabbis in Jewish history. To become a Pharisee, Saul had to take on the yoke of his rabbi, memorizing Gamaliel's interpretations, imitating his every action, and mastering the oral traditions of Israel. Saul was a prodigy. He would later boast that he was the Hebrew of Hebrews, advancing in Judaism many years beyond his own age. He was zealous for the law, faultless in his legalistic righteousness, and fiercely protective of Jewish traditions. He believed that the purity of his faith had to be defended at all costs, even if that meant shedding blood. Now, when a new movement began to spread, the followers of a crucified carpenter named Jesus of Nazareth, Saul saw it as a dangerous heresy that had to be eradicated. His zeal quickly turned to violence. When Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned to death by an angry mob, Saul was there. He was holding the coats of the executioners, giving his full approval. But he didn't stop there. The book of Acts describes Saul as breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. He went from house to house, dragging men and women off to prison. He even went to the high priest to secure letters of authority, allowing him to travel to foreign cities like Damascus to hunt down Christians, bind them, and bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. Saul was a man on a mission of destruction. But everything changed on the road to Damascus. As Saul approached the city, intent on arresting more believers, a light from heaven suddenly flashed around him, brighter than the midday sun. He fell on the ground and heard a voice that would alter the course of history. And a voice said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Trembling, Saul asked, "Who are you, Lord?" And the reply shattered his entire worldview. He said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Struck blind by the encounter, Saul was led by hand to Damascus. For 3 days he sat in darkness, fasting and praying. Then a courageous Christian named Ananias, sent by God, laid his hands on Saul. And something like scales fell from Saul's eyes. His sight was restored and he was immediately baptized. The great persecutor had become a follower of the very Christ that he tried to destroy. Saul, who had become known by his Roman name, Paul, was completely transformed. His mission completely reversed. Instead of destroying the church, he was called to build it. God chose him to be the apostle to the Gentiles, taking the message of Jesus beyond the Jewish people to the rest of the world. Paul's core message was revolutionary. Salvation is not earned by strictly following the Jewish law, but it's a free gift of grace received through faith in the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He taught that in Christ there is no longer Jew or Gentile, free or slave. We are all united under God's love. Driven by incredible grace, Paul embarked on 3 massive missionary journeys. He traveled over 10,000 miles by land and sea, planting churches all across the Roman Empire. His travels took him to major cultural centers across the ancient world. On his first journey, he sailed to Cyprus and traveled through the rugged region of Galatia, visiting cities like Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. On his second journey, he crossed into Europe, planting churches in Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, Athens, and Corinth. On his third journey, he spent years in the massive port city of Ephesus, where his preaching caused such a disruption to the local idol-making business that it sparked a city-wide riot. But this mission came at a staggering cost. The man who once persecuted others now faced relentless, brutal persecution himself. In Lystra, an angry mob stoned Paul and dragged him outside of the city, leaving him for dead. Yet, miraculously, he stood up and walked right back into the city to continue preaching. In Philippi, he and Silas were stripped, severely beaten with rods, and thrown into an inner dungeon with their feet in stocks. In Jerusalem, a mob tried to tear him apart in the temple court before Roman soldiers intervened. In his second letter to the Corinthians, Paul details the sheer volume of his suffering. He says that 5 times I've received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. This is the same punishment that Jesus got before he was crucified. 3 times he was beaten with rods. Once he was pelted with stones. 3 times he was shipwrecked. He spent a day and a night in the open sea. He faced danger from bandits, danger from his own people, danger from the Gentiles. He endured sleepless nights, crushing hunger, and freezing cold. On his final journey to Rome as a prisoner, his ship was caught in a massive hurricane and shattered against the rocks of Malta. Yet somehow he survived. None of this stopped him. Even while chained to Roman guards in damp prisons, he wrote letters. He wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, and Timothy, and these letters would become some of the foundations of Christian theology. Paul's life ended in martyrdom in Rome, likely beheaded under the Emperor Nero around year 65 AD, but his legacy has already been secured. From a zealous Pharisee to a relentless persecutor to the greatest missionary the world has ever known. The life of Paul is the ultimate testament of the transforming power of the grace of Jesus.